Guys, I have to tell you, I kind of feel like Britney Spears right now. This is really cool. Hi, my name is Kelcey, and today we're going to talk about the truth about blockchains and ICO, tell you a little bit about why I got into this space, about my company Trellis, and where I see this movement going. And I do call it a movement. So, a little bit about me. I am the managing partner at Trellis. I'm also a blockchain evangelist. And I got into this space kind of accidentally. A little over a year ago, I was bullied into investing by a friend. He was just like, just wire me some money, and I'm invested in Ether. And I was just like, that kind of sounds like drugs. And this is really shady and weird, and you live in a van. Like, how do I know this is legit? So a group of us corralled money, and we Venmo'd it, and he invested our money. And I knew I was not going to get rich off of this investment, but I was more or less curious about being an early adopter to this space. And from there, I realized just outside of the cryptocurrency aspects, how this could really revolutionize several industries, how this can change the lives of farmers in Iowa, how this can be a better way to send money to family overseas, how this could really change the food chain and save endangered animals and prevent blood diamonds from being sold and distributed. So I became a student of the platform, and I formed Trellis with my partner to coalesce the communities and bring education to the people. There's a saying that when you know better, you do better, and I think that people would make more informed decisions powered with the information to do such. So Trellis is a channel partner network that brings in the community of blockchain developers, entrepreneurs, experts, and leverage their skills and resources to kind of build more solutions and gain adoption. So Trellis does this by doing by 4 ways. We have a platform that first educates. Again, when you're empowered with the knowledge and information of this could be complex technology, you make better decisions. So we really want to bring knowledge that's kind of up here and attained by a few down and distribute it to the many. We also do collaboration. So this the entire ecosystem is based on community. And the community is kind of dispersed in private chat rooms and forums and kind of geek meetings. I spoke at a geek blockchain meeting earlier this week. And that's really how we vet ideas and bring proof of concepts to life. So we really vet this large community. Strategic partnerships. We want to bring the best solution providers to the table to execute on long-term goals and build better solutions. And deploy and evangelize. Trellis aims to be your community development team. We really want to go out there and evangelize what you're working on and get more early adopters onto the platform. So that is me, and that is Trellis. What is blockchain? So we're going to start here. And just for the record, there is really not a standard definition of blockchain. There's a lot of, there's no Webster definition. So I really grappled with how am I going to define something that hasn't really been defined. So this, to me, is probably one of the best definitions that's not technical, not a lot of jargon, but just really distills it down to what I think is the core essence of blockchain. And that is, it's a distributed ledger. It's consisting of different blocks of data that's encrypted, and it's chained to the next block, and it's using a hash, if you will, that's referencing the previous block. So every chain is in reference to the information before, and that's how you kind of get this long web of information. And this allows the blockchain to be used like a ledger, and it can be shared and accessed by anyone with the appropriate permissions. I think that's a good definition. It is literally a block of information chained together and encrypted, and it's accessible to everyone with the appropriate password or keys to access it. That's it. And when I'm having this conversation with people, usually I get a lot of okay, I think I've heard about blockchain, but I'm not really sure. So I go, well, have you heard of Bitcoin? And I usually get, yeah, I've heard of Bitcoin. I'm like, okay, that's a great start because that's how this was introduced to the world. So blockchain records every Bitcoin. And it provides a ledger for all of these transactions that are mined. So you have proof of ownership. And that's usually how we start the conversation. And it's a really great way for people to grasp onto something that could be kind of weighty. Bitcoin started as a digital currency. It was introduced to our world in 2009 as a way to mine, and it was kind of nefarious, the openings and starts of it. But as the technology was studied by software engineers and developers and people in business, they realized that the implications were huge. And it became more sophisticated, and different types of tokens were built to make this more of a platform. So we're going to talk about industries that are being transformed by blockchain. So there's a myriad of industries, as I mentioned earlier, but I distilled it to 5, and we're going to kick off with that now. Healthcare is a huge, huge, huge industry that's being transformed by blockchain. I spent the last few months consulting with a small startup in Philadelphia called Comcast NBC Universal. And they have within that huge space a true startup environment, and one of which is connected health, where they're really interested in tackling transparency in healthcare and making it more accessible. And they're going to start with their audience, their clients or paying customers. And what they're looking at is telehealth as a solution to do this, and break it into your television so you can like phone your doctor or email your doctor on prescriptions or different ailments, and kind of make that interaction a little bit more personal. So what we're seeing in healthcare is it's really a series of what's being done to the patient and not for the patient. And there's a lot of frustration around the space. I see this as an opportunity. And we see companies like Jim, which I have the logo for, which is a blockchain healthcare startup. They launched Jim Health to kind of combat this area of frustration and make the world of health more accessible, more transparent, and have the patient really have agency over their information. Law and government is another industry that's being transformed by this technology. The legal aspect is huge, and we're seeing something called smart contracts, which is a way of adding logic to something that normally would require a lot of intermediaries, but you could jump in there and add the logic that you need, and it's accessible to the parties that need to have access to it. And we're seeing that this is really opening up the space. This is a really great startup that I actually had the pleasure of speaking with a few months ago. They're not based in America. I want to say they're in Switzerland. But Agrello is really using AI, artificial intelligence, and the blockchain technology. They're using the Hyperledger platform to combine these two solutions. So lawyers or whoever, if you're administrating a will or a simple transaction where you don't necessarily want to bring in a lawyer, you can do so without any technical or legal expertise. And I think that's super, super empowering. Real estate is also very interesting. Earlier this week, I spoke with a company called Streetwire, and they are really combating the transparency issue with contracts in real estate. I spent a small portion of my career in real estate, and I actually had the pleasure of doing real estate in New York City. And if anyone's familiar with New York, it's lovely chaos, and the real estate scene is no exception. What they really want to combat is the information being credible and accessible. And right now there's a lot of ownership and information you need to do transactions with property owners, landlords, different brokers. So let's disperse this, but also have like a consensus on what's honest, what's real. Let's speed up these transactions. A closing could take anywhere from 3 to 5 months. and it's also very, very expensive. If we speed up the transactions, kind of eliminate the middleman in all of this, we can close in less than a week, 3 days. We could exchange ownership, we could prove ownership, we could really find out the history of the property and make this a more constructive, seamless experience. We're also seeing this is really huge in developing countries where ownership is really hard to prove. No one really has a record of deed to a home that their family has lived in for generations, and it's being seized by banks or wealthy individuals to be redeveloped. This could be a really great way to save and preserve what could be generational wealth. Media is a really big one for me. Anyone, just by show of hands, who remembers Napster? Like, thank you. I am not the oldest person here. So Napster was amazing for a lot of reasons. We were able to get access to our favorite songs illegally and listen to it as much as we want. And then that spawned Spotify and YouTube and all of these other online streamers. Really great for us, the consumer. Really great for brands. Not really great for artists. And they really got the short end of the stick in terms of being properly compensated for their craft. Blockchain and media really allows the artist to have agency of their IP and get paid properly for the art that they give to us and continue giving that art to us. And so this is only a win-win situation. Right now, there's kind of like this crowdfunding compensation model with artists getting paid when you subscribe to one of these services like Tidal or Spotify. They get like less than a penny on the songs that are streamed, which is considered now a win. But there's blockchain solutions that tokenizes the entire process, and it's more of a crypto, how did I say this, a crypto equity model. And I think that's a really, really amazing breakthrough for this space, so we could continue enjoying our artists and they can continue making the music that we love to listen to. And advertising is the one that I think I'm going to close out on in terms of like the major industries implicated or rather transformed by this space. The 2016 election, we saw a lot of fake news. We got a lot of really awful memes flooded in from a country that shall not be named. And we got a president who rose to power because of this. There's a way that you can have truth in advertising, and truth with a capital T, meaning there's a consensus of what's real and what's propaganda, and there's an opportunity with this technology to do that. I'm a really big fan of this New York agency called Mad Hive that is combating fake news and advertising and really getting back to the essence and making this a community-sourced, crowd-sourced endeavor. So I think that's a huge opportunity, and it's only going to get better. They're very, very early. I think they're less than a year old. But I have really high hopes, and they have some really amazing backers. Yep. So ICOs and beyond. So that's something that I want to talk about. ICOs is like the shiny pony, being seen as an alternative to traditional VC funding. And as of right now, it is. This year alone, there's been close to 300 ICOs, and that's a lot, and close, over billions of dollars raised for small companies in a relatively short number of time. My company Trellis advises on a number of ICOs, and we're working with a few companies that are going that route in the next 60 to 90 days, and it's really exciting. And I get asked often, is it a bubble? And my honest answer to that is yes. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I read a report this morning. I get flooded with upcoming ICO launches and opinion pieces. I read this really great piece this morning from CoinDesk, and they're one of the leading journalists out on in this space. And the author's opinion or assessment of what's happening is by mid-2018, it's going to be over in terms of ICOs. And he's pretty bullish on that. And I'm not sure. I'm still confident that even with what's happening with regulations and the SEC, if we could form a framework around how these are conducted, I think that it could be a really substantial and amazing option for founders who want to explore different ways to bring in money for their companies and grow. And it's also a really great opportunity for diverse founders, which is something I'm really passionate about. How do we get more diverse founders funded? And how do we create a platform for new ideas that don't have to really go the traditional route, that may not be suited for what they're doing? So I say stay tuned on that, because it's super interesting. I think even now it's too early to make a bold assessment that by mid next year it's going to be a wash. Last month, Trellis put on a really awesome conference in New York called the I-Conference, and it was really tackling the new regulations around ICO, the SEC, the legal aspects. We wanted to hear from, we wanted to get the opinions of people who are working both in the traditional space and they're kind of accessing or getting involved in what's happening now with blockchain. And then we wanted to talk about the industries that are impacted by this. And it was a really well-rounded conversation, and it was the first of its kind. And I realized that once you start talking about things that are outside of finance and cryptocurrency and investing, and you talk about how this has a worldwide effect, and have an honest, candid discussion with how this is changing and impacting people's lives, people are more receptive. And I think that's the narrative that needs to be picked up by the media. I think on your cable news channel or your local news, if you heard about how this is impacting real people and the potential, you would be more apt to create a wallet, invest in some Ether. If you're a baller and you're about that life, invest in some Bitcoin. But I think it's something that we should all try and not be afraid of, and go in with the intentions of it's still early and it's still something you could jump in on. And just to kind of double back on what I mean by it's still early, someone asked me, it was like, I think it's too late. They're like, I think it's too late to invest. Like, I don't have $6,000 for Bitcoin. Like, I think that's insane. And like right below Bitcoin, like if you look at the top 5 currencies that are trading, right below Bitcoin's Ethereum, which is what I invest in. And I think as of this morning, it's trading, I want to say $317 a coin. And then below that is Litecoin, which is trading at $61 as of today. And then below that, I want to say is Ripple. I think that's $11. And then below, it just gets lower and lower and lower. And I think like the smallest coin is like way under penny. It's like pennies because of all these ICOs flooding the market. And I reminded him of a tweet that I got the other day from a friend who spoke at our conference. And it was dated from 2011. And the developer's like, damn it, I wish I hadn't sold my 1,700 Bitcoins for 80 cents that I got for 30 cents 8 months ago, because now it's $8. Hashtag Bitcoin, hashtag gypped. And I was just like, that's insane. And it was funny because it put into context how volatile this market is and how it's constantly changing. And then I read another quote that said, if I invested $1,000 8 years ago into Bitcoin, I would be worth $46 million today. Yeah, guys. So Bitcoin's the big thing right now, but there are coins that you can access, and it reads like an index, and you could play around with, and you could get on now. Like, you could get on today. And if you are interested in setting up your wallet, like, I'll walk you through this on my phone, because the barrier to entry, super low and super accessible if you just know where to go for that information and how to tap into it. And really, that's the goal of Trellis. We want to make this information super accessible. We want to empower you to make these investment decisions and to think about your long-term wealth generation for your family, for your peer group, for your company potentially. And that's what gets me excited every day. And that's why I love coming on stage and geeking out about this and being Britney Spears. So thank you very much. And I look forward to talking to you all afterwards. I didn't even use my notebook.
Yeah. Hi. I have lots of questions, but
Sure.
I'll keep it short. Why is blockchain not just Web 3.0?
I get that a lot. And it has the same robustness as the internet. I think the difference is when the web was becoming a thing, the barrier of entry super, super high. You had to own a $2,000 piece of equipment to tap into it. So you were in a different class status. You had to have had time to create hacks and software because that didn't exist, and you were part of these hobbyist groups. So it was very niche because it wasn't something that everyone could kind of grab onto. Like the tech aspect for blockchain is really, really small. Like you could do it on a phone. You don't even need a smartphone. The digital gap has kind of closed. So I would say the vast majority of people have access to internet or some type of device that they can check and like join this platform. So the opportunities are bigger.
So that actually is a perfect segue to my next question, because a big part of the conversation about blockchain is this intermediation. Even though it's more accessible, as you explained, most companies, if they want to get into this, they would still need an intermediary. They would still need to have an interface with the customer, for example. You would still need one of these startups, hopefully, that are in the room today would become the next intermediary. So how do we avoid that we're just sort of recreating history and just creating we're replacing old intermediaries with new intermediaries that are just going to charge the same fees?
Yeah, and that is something that I was at Blockchain 360 on Monday speaking, and that question came up a lot. IBM is investing a lot of money in the infrastructure. Companies that are wanting to use the platform are building private blockchains, and I think that kind of defeats the purpose. Industry is not going to lead this revolution. Like the revolution is already well underway, and industry is really, really, really far behind. This is not going to work without industry, though. Like we need them to adopt. And the only way it's going to work is if it's truly public, and they could, like each chain could speak to each other the way it's intended to, and there's trust in the tech. The fact that there's still data breaches and companies like Equifax where every one of us, and we're impacted by this, and this 3-digit esoteric score that determines whether we're going to be able to buy our next home or car, and this is out in the open and exposed, that isn't okay. And this is happening with every industry, not just our credit industry, but it's happening in healthcare. This year alone, there's been over 160 data breaches, which affected over 5 million patients, which cost billions of dollars to fix. And 160, like, we don't even hear about this. Like, we hear about the big ones with Mount Sinai and, like, really big brands that we've heard of, but, like, a lot of this is not being reported, but it's happening. And the solution is blockchain. And I'm betting the farm on this as a way to mitigate these situations.
And the next one would be, of course, we would all benefit from e-government as well, which was spoken of earlier. The governments don't tend to be early adopters of technology, so they would have to follow industry? Dubai made a very bold statement that by 2020, all government records will be on blockchain. And they're really leading that. We're seeing this in Eastern Europe as well. I mean, they have smaller populations to deal with, but in Estonia, they're doing this with health records. So we're not going to see it in America for a while, just because we have a lot of regulations and compliance issues. So it's going to take a while to kind of comb through all of that to find a solution that fits. It's not a one-size-fits-all.
but I definitely see the movement happening there, yeah.
For Bitcoin, you talked earlier about barrier to entry. I see, and I've had some people comment to me last night, that one of the barriers of entry is that whenever it comes up in conversation, people talk about it as a market, as a stock, as an investment, rather than a transactional currency.
Yeah.
Isn't that also a barrier to entry? Because it's sort of scary to those who see it only as this very fluid investment.
Well, we're not really using Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency, for that matter, to its full potential in America. We are looking at it more as a stock. It's something to kind of round out our portfolios. We're not transacting with it. We're seeing it in the West Coast. You can buy your coffee with Bitcoin. I think a few years ago, someone paid a Papa John's for 2 pizzas in Bitcoin. That person's super rich right now. We're not talking about it outside of the investment, but you're absolutely correct. It should be more
Shouldn't
transactional.
that be the purpose?
Yeah, absolutely. Just because it's going up and down. Although I like to online shop, and I just moved into a new apartment. I was like, I need to buy furniture, and one of the options was Bitcoin. I was like, word. So we're seeing it.
Yeah, but I guess my question is, how do we get to the point? Because for more companies, let's say, to accept it, that means they need to get rid of their fear that this is not a good world to step into.
You can transact. On our website, we set up a Stripe. We accept all major credit cards, PayPal, Bitcoin, Ethereum. So you can do it. It's just, it takes more people having cryptocurrency and trust to use that as an additional way to fund their lives. But it's available. It's just not really popular.
Right. One last question, ICOs. So if I want to start an ICO, because ICO is really based on an idea. It's not based on an established business. So how do we earn these investors? How do we get this? So many people want to be out there and offer an ICO. How do we earn the investors?
So if you would have told me that 8 months ago, I would have said yes, because there are a lot of companies that were putting out vaporware and really bad papers, and they were making tons of money just because no one really knew what was going on. And it was like, whoa, this is crazy. I wanna get in on this coin, and like I could get in on like with $100 and I have like ownership of this company. And there were a lot of large companies that were inflating the market by going all in and then cashing out. So it was really crazy. But 6-8 months ago, yes, you could make $10 million in 3 minutes. Now that this is like, we're almost at 300 and it's October. So there's a framework and structure around this. So you need a white paper that's credible. You actually do need a business, and you need something more than just an idea. Like ICOs now are being favored by on the investment side. Companies that have been around, they have a product, they've actually gone the traditional route of venture and raised money like traditional ways, and this is another option that they're looking into. They have advisors. The team is a legit team. They're community vetted. They're doing all the right things. They're not spamming, millions of people all over the world with, hey, this is my product and we launch in 8 days, get in on this. Like now it's just like there is a process to this, so we can avoid having, as you say, like companies that are making a lot of money on vaporware. So I think it is a viable option, and I just see it getting more robust as there's more structure around it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.